I don't know who needs to hear this, but POTS and vasovagal syncope are not the only things that go wrong with the autonomic nervous system. It's probably better to think about autonomic dysfunction as existing on a spectrum like this. On one hand, you could have pure autonomic failure that exists in diseases like Parkinson's disease, where the autonomic nervous system is so broken down that it can barely sustain life giving functions. On the other side of the spectrum, you could have things that cause cold and clammy hands, and then you have everything in between. And things like POTS and vasovagal syncope probably exist somewhere in this middle high end of the spectrum. All of that is just to say that just because you didn't meet the criteria for POTS or vasovagal issues on a tilt table test doesn't mean that something isn't wrong with your autonomic nervous system and that it's not something that needs to be addressed. These ideas aren't necessarily new. In fact, it goes back over 100 years with Hans Selye talking about something called general adaptation syndrome when he discusses how prolonged chronic stress can actually make people feel quite poorly over time. Selye broke it down into three phases where you can have the shock to the system from initial stressor, you have a resistance phase where your body is coping and adapting to it reasonably well, and then there's an exhaustion phase that occurs after it's been exposed to it for a long period of time. And it's his theory that a lot of people generally don't feel well because they are in this exhaustion stage of their sympathetic nervous system. While there's a lot of critique about how simplistic this is for a lot of people, there's one thing that is very clear. Stress and a dysregulated sympathetic nervous system is not just a benign psychological phenomenon. There are real biological effects from the sympathetic nervous system on our immune system, and that could dysregulate our immune system, which then in turn feedback and dysregulate our brain. So if all your testing was negative for POTS and vasovagal syncope, that's okay. That's actually still a good thing. But it doesn't mean that you should do nothing, and we should still take active steps to get better regulation of your nervous system.